How does your faith help with we talk about habits and mindfulness. How does faith affect your ability to recharge and avoid burnout?
Probably in more ways than I can actually think of right off the top. But, I mean, one of them is by filling my time outside of work with a meaningful activity. You know, if I had no desire to sit and read God's Word in the Bible and build my character outside of work, go to church on a Sunday, I add up those minutes during the week. I add up that hour of a sermon every week. I add up the time that I spend in the Bible or talking to God or in prayer or trying to develop myself in that arena. It's a good bit of time each week, therefore each month, therefore each year. The question is, what would I personally, left to my own accord, fill that time with if it wasn't with God and time spent with Him or learning about Him? And for me, who knows what I'd fill that with? I'd be distracted by something, whether it was something that other people would consider healthy. Sure, I could go get some more exercise, I guess. Not so much doing something for my mind or my character, just being an outlet. I could fill it with distractions. Would I sit and turn on the TV or scroll through something? Maybe. Does that really offer me any benefit? Not nearly as much as something that builds my character or, educates me, forces me to seek more wisdom and knowledge in some area that's better for myself and society. I think the answer is it makes a huge impact just because I know myself personally, and if I had more open time in my schedule, guaranteed I'd fill it with something less meaningful that didn't encourage sustainment and betterment of my practice and my interaction with other people. That time is well spent. And that's probably the biggest benefit to how my faith leads to sustainment in this job. What would I do with that extra time that's not spent in the Bible? Who knows? It wouldn't be as character building as the time I'm spending now.
Well, don't they say something like the devil's able to get a foothold when you have an abundance of time not spent in your purpose or intentional time? I mean, whatever you fill your off work hours with, exercise, family stuff, in prayer, reading, whatever it is, if you're not filling that time productively, you're going to go for that short-term dopamine dump, scrolling social media, watching TV, the things that really aren't going to add much to your life. So there's something to be said for keeping yourself busy with productive things, and not giving your brain that time to do something easy
especially something easy. I like the way you put that. What sustains me more, and this also comes back around to God as well, just by the nature of it, is choosing to do hard things. If you think interpreting the Bible or struggling with your faith is an easy task, not so much. I would argue that it is a difficult task, and I think we're designed to do hard things, man. And I think when you choose to do hard things versus being soft on yourself or flagrantly lazy with your time, whatever, turning on the TV, every day and every moment, watching some Netflix series forever and not challenging your mind or your body in some way, I don't think it's beneficial. Choosing to do hard things, whether that's mental or physical or emotional, I think. And again, that's completely biblical. And I think without a biblical background to this, people would find it true. I think there's no way you could argue to the death that doing easy things builds your character, your endurance, your desire to be better. That's completely illogical. So I think choosing to do hard things, of which chasing and striving after being more like Jesus is one of them, amongst lots of other things we do in life, betters us, makes us feel more capable, builds our character, our stamina in the emotional and the physical realm, and all of that energy and betterment plays out well as a provider in the emergency department of all jobs. I mean, maybe you could argue that doing hard things from an intellectual standpoint or an emotional standpoint might not aid you as much in certain jobs that are very simplistic or monotonous, but require somebody who wants to do them and has the skill set to do them. I'm not putting down any particular job. You could argue it's less beneficial, but I'll tell you what, coming back to the emergency department and dealing with thousands of people a year and dealing with sickness and death and all the other stuff in between and addiction and mental health issues, building yourself up through the challenges of all the things we're talking about is infinitely helpful.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think especially the hard things that you choose.
Right.
Weightlifting is a great example because weightlifting is very painful. And it's in that moment, if you were not lifting weights, you would assume you're having a heart attack or something is horribly wrong because of the amount of pain that you're forcing yourself
Compartment
into.
syndromes all over the place. Yeah.
You would assume something's horribly wrong in isolation if you weren't lifting weights.
Right.
And that's a great example of something very, very hard that you're forcing on yourself, that you're choosing. And so it makes the rest of life a little bit easier, I think, when
that's the way to
if
put
you
it.
can lift some heavy weights before you go to work, you just did something that you chose, that you put on yourself that's very difficult.
Yep.
And that makes the rest of your hard shift be like, well, I dealt with a lot of pain and lifting some really heavy weights before I came into work today. That was really hard. Yep. I can deal with whatever life's going to throw at me the rest of the day.
That's a great example.
Because your life's going to have plenty of hard things that you're not choosing. You didn't pick to have happen to you today.
Yep.
And so if you force yourself to do very difficult things that you're choosing, it just makes those ones that are forced on you much easier to deal with, I feel like.
I mean, you could relate to this. Think about the patient. Just pick two patients in your mind. You don't even have to have specific patients. Just the idea of these patients, because I know you're going to agree with this, and so would anyone in an emergency department. You ask the most bitter, weathered ER nurse who's been abused and beat up and overworked for years in the emergency department, which patient do you choose when I say this? You've got someone who's in the emergency department for a physical pain-related complaint, and they give you a pain score of 4. The other one in the next door, same complaint, gives you a pain score of 11 on your scale of 10. Which patient you want?
Right.
So, where I'm going with that is, when you do hard things and your pain tolerance emotionally or physically or mentally has to readapt, has to go up, you are much easier to deal with, much happier in your moments of suffering, much more tolerant of that suffering and not pouring it out on others because you know it could be worse. We always fault the 19-year-old who gives you a pain scale of 10 for a hangnail, but maybe they don't know yet, and they've not reset their scale of 10 to the worst thing they've experienced. Now, at some point in their life, they're going to have something that makes them realize what an 8, a 9, a 10 is. It's going to get us all, even if it's in your last breath. You're going to know that pain scale is not what you thought it was. Those of us who go seeking to find out what we can tolerate by doing hard things and start to reset that emotional or physical pain scale earlier in life and know that in that moment of suffering, this is a 5 compared to where I've been. I'm not having a good time, but that's where I'm at. You're better for it. Physically and mentally, you're better off for it. As an ER doc, I'm better off coming in saying my tolerance of this shift, my pain score with these interactions is at a 2 right now. Because I've dealt with 10.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're better.
Yeah, the pain scale is an interesting concept. Because I think back, this last week I had kind of my peak sets where I'm going to do a deload week. So I was at my hardest lifts, the most weight, the most reps. And I think like doing dumbbell presses, that last one that I'm pushing on, that's probably a 10 out of 10 because at a certain point, I just can't get it up.
You cannot, yeah.
I'm maxing out possibly what I can throw up. And that's probably like a 10 out of 10 because I physically can't push it up anymore. It hurts too bad. My muscles are giving out. And so the pain scale is an interesting thing. Forcing yourself into a 10 out of 10 or whatever you think is a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for pushing yourself to that limit.
Yeah.
Because then when you have little aches and pains throughout the day, you're like, I was hurting way worse earlier. And it's all relative,
It's
and
relative.
That's the tricky thing about the pain scale is it's very subjective and it's so relative. And that's why it doesn't really help guide a lot of stuff in the ER because one person's 10 is the 85-year-old's 2. Yeah. And that's why, practically speaking, when we have these 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds coming in, complaining of 5 out of 10 pain,
Yeah.
a little red flag goes up in your mind, like this person's lived a lot of life.
Right.
They've had a lot of painful experiences mentally and physically.
Yep.
If they're saying that they have 5 out of 10 abdominal pain, we need to do some investigation here, because something could very well be going on. And that's why we worry about the stoic 80-year-old, 90-year-old.
Yep.
They've lived a lot of life,
Yeah.
and life's forced a lot of things on them. Maybe they've chosen some difficult things, but life's forced a lot of stuff on you at the age of 80.
Yeah.
So when they come in, it's a little bit more concerning.
Agreed.
When they've got some pain going on.
Agreed.
And that's when we find stuff. Those are ones that are, statistically speaking, we find things on those patients.
Yeah. In regard to burnout too, there's a lot of data these days on the benefit of, pushing yourself and doing hard things and finding less satisfaction in the reward of being done or getting to the goal, and finding the satisfaction in the suffering throughout. Mm-hmm. Being in the middle of that, 5 miles of direct ascent on your mountain bike when your quads are crying out and your lungs are on fire. Getting to the place where mentally you're like, this was the goal, to feel this, to prove to myself that I could do it. Not only can I do it, I'm going to do it for another mile. When you find that you're striving for that feeling so that you can say to yourself, look at me go, versus I just, the goal is to be done and not suffer anymore. When you reshift your mindset to find that the goal is the struggle and that you're overcoming it, you're better. You're better at everything in life, mentally, physically, emotionally. And that is why in this job, it is good to choose to do hard things with your time away, so that the shift feels not only easier, your interactions with humans feel easier, your, per se, suffering at the tough times in this job are easier than they were yesterday, because you're thriving in the hard parts. And it's a bonus. It's dessert after the meal when you're off and you're done and you're free. But the main goal was to prove to yourself that you could do it and do it better tomorrow than you did yesterday. This is why I tell my kids all the time, I don't care what they go into, as long as they're listening to God, in my opinion, and figuring out their way in life. But I tell them all the time, when they complain, not even in a bad way, but complain about how something was difficult or is difficult in the moment, good. I tell them, good, do hard things. Next time you'll do something even harder, and you'll look back and go, man, look what I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. Build your stamina for life.
Your confidence.
It's a marathon. Confidence is a whole topic of its own, but you will inadvertently build confidence by doing hard things. And that, the mental side of all this versus the physical and emotional, is everything. Your perspective of what is a struggle, of what is hard, of what is pain, of what is suffering, is everything. If every little thing, which some of us are kind of wired towards, if your perspective is that every hard thing is damn near the end of your world, well, life's going to get hard. Mm-hmm. Life's going to get real hard real fast. Yeah. I tell them all the time, do hard things. Do hard things, because life gets easier.
And you make a good point. It's journey over destination.
It is.
Like the journey is actually, I think studies have proven that you're getting the most dopamine before you've accomplished the thing. After you accomplish the thing, you're back at a new baseline.
That's right.
And then you find yourself wanting to find something else to push towards.
That's right.
I mean, even with med school, PA school, you're like, okay, well, now I'm here. This didn't give me everything that I thought it would. I thought I was arriving, and now you kind of realize you've got to strive for something else. I think it's underestimated by the general population how important it is to be striving and working towards something consistently, because it's the striving that helps. It's not reaching the goal, whatever that goal is. It's the striving for that goal.
The reward comes from striving, from the journey. Mm-hmm. The reward itself, whether you see it or not, is not in the ending. It's how you got there. That is the reward, that you can appreciate the difference between working hard and resting. Yeah. It's the same thing with, if you go the doctor route, man, you're an undergrad, you're learning something new every day, you're excited to get to med school. You get into med school, you're learning something new every day. It's very, very hard. You finish it. You get to residency. You want to be board certified in something. You're going through residency. You're learning something every day. You're getting beat up, but there's an ultimate goal at the end. If the goal is the end, you get out, you hit attending hood, and every day starts to look a little more the same. You know a little more. You've been exposed to a little more. You do the things you did before a little better, a little faster. But it's similar. Every day is similar. Every now and then something catches you off guard, which is the beauty of emergency medicine. But it's not med school. It's not residency. It's not this uphill slope. I'm learning something new every day. I'm struggling every day. There's an end to this eventually. Well, you hit the end. You're the attending. Now it's a little more monotonous. So how are you going to satisfy yourself to do that for 20 or whatever?
Yeah.
Strive. Find a way to strive. Do something hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lucas made this point a couple weeks ago that, most med students, they achieve that goal. They're done with residency. They're practicing. That's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Like you thought this was the pinnacle.
Right.
And it's really just the beginning. Now you need to figure out how you're going to survive in whatever specialty you chose for 20 years. How are you going to keep doing this day in and day out?
That's right.
You accomplished a huge goal that you were working for a decade.
Right.
But that's just the beginning. Now
and you knew that when you started. You're like, I want to be a doctor. You're there. That tells you. You knew that was going to be the beginning. Once you realize that the beginning is not another step per se on an uphill journey, you have to make it that way. Mm-hmm. The reason you enjoyed getting there was because it was a slope of difficulty and challenge. You have to recreate that somehow in your mind, or you're going to go nuts once you get there.
Yeah.
Hence all the burnout out there. How you going to look at tomorrow is different than today.
Yeah, we're not meant to plateau, I think, as humans. We're meant to strive. We're meant to constantly be improving. I think when you stagnate, it's such a dangerous place to be in.
There's the beauty of the Bible right there. That's the example of Jesus. And the scriptures say it. People don't like to hear this. Even Christians don't like to hear this. It says, be perfect as I am perfect, be holy as I am holy. Get there. And then there are other scriptures that they say, well, there's the contradiction of the Bible. It's not a contradiction. He told you won't get there on this side of heaven. You will not get there. Hence the reason he put that spirit in you to continue to strive and do better. But 1% better every day on a scale that doesn't stop at 100, that's the goal, to be more like God. So he set a bar that you can't reach here for your benefit, not to tease you or dangle a carrot on a stick, not to crush your spirit when you realize you can't get there. He told you, you won't get here, but strive for perfection, because we're more satisfied, we're more driven, we're better to each other when we have a goal that we have yet to attain. And here's a goal you won't attain till the day you die. He gave you the ability to strive for betterment for your entire life, if you find it. I mean, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, you even hear, the Apostle Paul, who wrote the majority of the New Testament, talks about his struggles a ton. The guy lived a pretty miserable life.
Yeah.
Looking at it from the outside. And, Paul's story is he was killing Christians until God spoke with him and said, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Mm-hmm. And he changed his life, but he struggled. He was striving the rest of his career.
Yep.
And it was not easy.
That's right.
But he was arguably, the greatest Christian in the New Testament because of his struggle, not because it was easy. He never arrived at godhood or perfection.
That's right.
It was the striving through all of it that made him, one of the greatest voices for Christianity and spread it far and wide because of the struggle, not because he had achieved everything or even arguably figured everything out.
Yep.
It was him fighting through the struggle and the difficulties, I think, that made him great.
Agreed. Yep, agreed. And he said, even towards the end of his life, after all the things he'd done per se right, he was humble enough and honest enough and correct in saying, I have been the worst of these. He knew. I'm not perfect. Matter of fact, there's probably people who have done this better than me, but that's okay. I'm still striving. I'm never arrived.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't lead to betterment. Life's not over yet.
And you can only compare yourself to who you were yesterday. You can't compare yourself. That's why I think social media is so bad, is you're comparing yourself to everyone's perfect day, which is what they're showing you on social media. These crazy vacations, these awesome victories, which are great to see.
Sure.
But if that's all you look at in isolation, everyone else's life's perfect. They're doing way better things than I am.
Yeah.
They're doing way better in life than I am. But you got to compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Am I better than Aaron was yesterday?
That's what we ought to do. That's exactly what we ought to do.
Yeah.
Yep. Good point. I got a lot to say about social media, but it's not today's conversation. Yeah.
I think personally, I mean, we don't have to go into it in depth, but I think social media's got to go away in the next few years. I think that no one really thinks that social media has enough redeeming qualities that it needs to stick around. I feel like everyone I talk to understands that it's really a cancer to society. You're seeing all the extremes of both sides of whatever issue there is possible.
Yep.
And you're not seeing the good in humanity. And there's a lot of good in humanity. Your average person that you see at the grocery store, at the gym, is a good person that you could have a conversation with about anything.
Yeah.
And maybe not convince each other of each other's opinions, but still have a good conversation and probably find at your core some common ground with that person. But you don't see that on social media because it's all the extreme voices.
Yeah. That's only one downfall too. I mean, you can't ignore the literature about the young, being more depressed, more anxious, higher suicide rates, being sucked into the, social media apps every day. You can't tell me that every time you're at a stoplight and you look over, not just the distracted driving part of it, the fact that the person is so sucked into scrolling through these freaking TikTok videos that they have to do it every moment, everywhere they go. What benefit is that to your life? Let's be honest. You can't tell me you're watching purely positive videos and then going out with your time that you have to implement those things in your own life. No, you're back on there looking for more. It's an addiction. It's a dopamine dump. It's a complete distraction. It can serve a purpose. I mean, let's be honest. It can serve some sort of purpose. Sure, you can keep in touch with old friends, family, relatives, people you can't see every day physically. Sure, you could say that's what you're doing, but how many of you really have personal friends with 3,000 people? You don't. They may have been an acquaintance at one time. They may or may not be looking at anything you put up, and vice versa. That's not mainly its purpose in your life. Its purpose is to suck you in, to sell you something, to distract you from human interaction. I mean, the amount of people these days, it used to be, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, maybe a 20-year-old, you'd be like, man, they're still learning how to socially interact. They're a little inept in their ability to make eye contact, shake a hand, hold a conversation, not be socially awkward, to speak and communicate well with another human being. Now it's like 25, 30, 35 years old. I'm looking back at these people younger than me that are full-blown adults. There's no which way otherwise to put it. This is not a kid anymore, and they can't comfortably hold a conversation eye to eye with a person because it would be so much easier to be on a phone. If you don't think social media scrolling leads to being more apt to text than call, or skip a social event where you have to look people in the eyes because you're better doing it through a screen, you're ignorant. Those two lead to each other. The decline in people's ability to interact with other humans, which is what we're made to do, it's getting worse and worse, and a lot of it is attributable to all kinds of features of social media's existence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And technology in general. We talk about the benefits of the progression of technology. Well, there could be, but the way humans use it for laziness and to disappear and to be distracted, in general, we don't apply it for the good that it has potential to provide.
Yeah. And I see the appeal. I mean, it's such an easy, quick dopamine dump. It's hard not to get on social media. It's, going back to the doing hard things. Yeah. It's hard for me to delete these apps off my phone and not every spare minute just scrolling because it's a quick dopamine dump. But choosing the quick dopamine dump, whether it's alcohol or social media, whatever, it's not going to benefit you long term. It benefits you in that moment. You feel maybe you feel better because you're scrolling social media, but your long term mental health.
You feel distracted, right? There's a Christian song that says it best. I don't want to be on my phone, but I can't be alone. I can't have a moment of quiet. We look at our kids. We know this. This generation doesn't look at their kids and say this, but 10 years ago, we knew this. We would say, your kids benefit from boredom. That's where creativity is born. Even as adults now, we don't live that example. We can't have a moment of boredom. How many times have you jumped up from the toilet to go get your phone you didn't realize you didn't have? Don't lie. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
You can't be bored for a minute in your mind. Now picture the next generation that's already overstimulated and the fact that they can't have a moment of silence to know what to do with it. Good luck with how they're going to function in 10, 20 years.
And if
social media
if you don't have boredom, you don't have that gap in time, how are you supposed to hear the Holy Spirit?
Oh, if you're a believer, I don't care if you're a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Christian. If you believe in a higher power and you're striving, let me put it this way, all religious texts, I have been exposed to many, by the way. I was not born and raised in the church or in a Christian home. I found God when I was 25 years old. Before that, I spent 2 or 3 years in a Buddhist temple. I read a Quran. I went to every church imaginable, and met tons of people trying to figure out what is this talk about a God in the world and why do different people believe different things. I am not ignorant to religions and ideologies. All texts, all sacred texts, will talk about the need to meditate on these things. Meaning, sit in deep thought, often in silence, and seek what you're looking to find. You cannot do that on a screen and process what's going by every second of every day. You are not in any way, I don't care if you're in the midst, you could argue, well, every time I pick up my phone, it's a Bible study. Really? Really? If that's true, more power to you. But think about it. All that time in between that accumulates, minutes become hours, become days, become weeks. When your little iPhone flashes and says you had 2 hours and 32 minutes of screen time, how many of those minutes were spent with you bettering yourself or seeking what you say is your priority in this life? And how many were not? Let's be honest about that. Something to think about.
Yeah. Not all that time is spent with productivity and things that benefit you, for sure.
Yeah. I doubt it. Yeah.